public who wish to listen or watch the meeting may do so by accessing the meeting link above. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Shawsheen website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Okay, so Nancy, it's me and you.
Mr. Peterson didn't think he'd be available for the 7 o'clock, but he will be here for the 7:30.
All right. Honey. So I don't know if we want to just delve into it. Did you look through it, Nancy?
Oh, yeah.
Did you have any questions on it?
Oh, no, I understood every bit.
Yeah, I know you did. I don't understand it all, but I figured you did.
I'm waiting to be taught.
So Colleen, you
want me to jump in?
Yes,
All right.
jump in.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and share my screen here. I don't know if you have the presentation in front of you, but it's, Patty, it's the same presentation that we do annually.
Yeah, I sent it to Patty and Nancy. Brad, I don't think I sent it to you. I wasn't sure if you were coming, but I did forward it to Patty and Nancy.
Okay. It actually says the host disabled participation of screen sharing. Melanie, do you know how to fix that by any chance?
That's Scott if he's still on.
He's just backing off the screen already.
So he should be able to do it. If not, they have it. So just
Okay.
go on ahead, Colleen.
All right, I'll just work through it. So in front of you, you should have, it's about a 10-page document. It's labeled exit presentation.
Yep, got it.
All right. So in this presentation tonight, I'm going to summarize the audit results, which are still draft. And then I'm going to go through some highlights of the financial statements and talk about some future considerations for the district. We can start on page 1 of the presentation, which is the audit results. So as the audit subcommittee, this is really the most important page that you want to pay attention to, because these are your audit results. Within that 80-page packet is 3 audit reports that we issue. The first report is the independent auditor's report, and that's the report in which we express an opinion on the district's financial statements. And we expressed an unmodified opinion on the district's financial statements, which is the best opinion that you can receive. And that second bullet, also included within that opinion, we make note to the readers of the financial statements that there is a section of that audit package, which is called the management discussion and analysis. That's the first several pages. That is unaudited information. It's not audited. We're not required to audit it. All we're required to do is make sure that that information included within there doesn't disagree with what's in our financial statements, and it does not. The second report that we issue is the report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance based on governmental auditing standards. And as part of this report, we review the district's compliance with certain grants and contracts, also compliance with DESI's requirements, and we also review the internal controls over the financial function. And based on our work, we noted that there were no findings in regards to internal control over the financial reporting and no findings regarding compliance. And the third report that we issue in the package is the independent auditor's report on compliance for each major program and internal control required by uniform guidance. So what that report is because the district expends greater than $750,000 of federal expenditures, you're required to undergo what's called a uniform guidance audit. And in that audit, we review the school's federal programs, and we select the largest program and perform a detailed review of that program to make sure that the internal controls over that program are in compliance. And also there was the grant, also you expended the money in accordance with the federal guidelines. And the program that we tested this year was the special education program. And As a result, we noted there was no findings related to the internal control over the special education grant, and there was no findings for compliance over the special education report. So what all that means is you got a clean opinion on your financial statements, and you had no findings under governmental auditing standards and no findings under uniform guidance. So that's the best audit report that you can receive. Hopefully that Nancy, does that make it clear to you?
So we passed.
You passed.
Yes.
Passed with flying colors.
Flying
Yeah.
colors, Nancy.
Okay.
So like I said, this is the most important page. As the audit subcommittee, that's what you should be most concerned with, is what opinion did we receive and did we have any findings? So you received the best opinion and you had no findings. And then I'll transition to the financial results themselves. So what I prepared is graphs that demonstrate the financial results for fiscal year 2019. And I also included the results for the past 5 years, just for a comparison. And as I had mentioned before we started formally the meeting, the district has one of the most complicated sets of financial statements, just because with governmental accounting, there's many different financial statements that are presented within the audit package. The financial statements are actually 10 pages long. But for the sake of this presentation, I summarize them into 2 major buckets. The first one is the governmental activities, which is the activities of the district that are educational in nature. And then the second bucket is those that are business-like in nature. And if you look at page 13 of the audit report, you'll see there's 2 columns. One represents the governmental activities and one represents the business type activities. So I'm going to go through those 2 columns in detail in the next couple pages. So as you can see on page 3 of this presentation, the total assets for the governmental activities, you can see the 5-year trend. In 2019, there was a dip in the total assets, which was a result of, there was a slight decrease in cash and also a decrease in your capital assets, which was just due to depreciation. But overall, they've remained fairly consistent, as you can see in that graph on page 3. And then if you'll turn to page 4, we represent the district's total liabilities. And as you can see, over the past 2 years, fiscal year 2018 and 2019, there was a large jump each year in the total liabilities, which is really 100% contributable to the liability for the pension and the liability for the OPEB. And those 2 numbers are determined by an actuary. So they're really outside of the district's control, and they make up the largest portion of the school's liabilities. And then the second chart on page 4 is the detailed net position. So what the net position represents is all these surpluses and deficits of the district since it opened, since day 1. And as you can see, really in 2018 and 2019, you see those large decreases, and that's a direct result, again, of the OPEB and the pension. So each year, the pension expense and the OPEB expense across the board for all governmental entities is increasing, and you'll see that as a direct result in your liabilities there, and then the net position, because you have to expense that portion each year, so it increases the deficit in the net position. And then we'll transition to page 5, which shows the governmental activity revenues and expenses. So as I previously mentioned, the governmental activities are educational in nature. And the major categories of revenues for the district is the town assessments, the state aid, which is largely the Chapter 70 student funding, grants, and then other. And as you can see, each year, the revenue is increasing slightly each year. And it's directly related to the increase in the expenses. If you look at the chart below, the expenses, are increasing in proportion to the increases in revenue, which is what you want to see. And then again, if you look at the expenses, the increases each year are directly related to the red part of those graphs, which is the employee retirement. And then next we'll transition to the business type activities. So the business type activities are those that are self-supporting in nature and include all the revolving funds and the daycare fund. And then the total assets in total are fairly consistent year over year if you look at the 5-year trend. This year we did see a shift in the types of assets that make up the total. If you can see the blue is the cash. So there was a decrease in cash this year and then an increase in the interfund, which was just due to the expenditure of the cash on governmental activities opposed to the business type activities. So we have to represent the money transferring from the business type activities to the governmental. The next graph on page 7 is the total liabilities. The business type activities have very minimal liabilities. This year, the total was $8,000. It was just accounts payable. And then the graph at the bottom of page 7 is the detailed net position for the business type activities. Again, if you look at the 5-year trend, pretty much you've been running a break even in the business type activities pretty much over the past 5 years, and that graph's remained fairly consistent. And then we'll flip to page 8, which details, again, the revenues and expenses of the business type activities. You can see for 15 through 18, there was a dip in the revenue, and then we were able to increase the revenue in 2019. And that increase was spread out upon each of the major categories. So you did see increases in program services, the LPN, the daycare, and the pool in fiscal year 2019. And then you'll also see the same really increases in expenses to correlate with the increases in revenue. And again, the business type activities ran about a break even for fiscal year 2019. Now, I went through that pretty quickly, just because hopefully you're seeing these financial results and they're consistent with what you were seeing all year for fiscal year 19. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. Back on page 7, the liabilities under business activities.
Yes.
Explain to me again why that huge increase?
So it seems huge just because it was a $7,000 increase. But because the liabilities in the previous year were only $1,000, it bumped up to $8,000 this year. And all it was a payable. So expenses that were incurred before year end, which were paid after year end. So there was a $7,000 increase, but because in previous years they were so low, it looks large on this graph.
Okay.
But it really isn't.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
Patty, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, great. The next section of this presentation, I just wanted to go over some future considerations. So there is new guidance that's been issued that will affect future years' audits and the way some of the information is presented. Fortunately, in the accounting profession, one of the good things about the COVID was all this guidance was delayed a year. Yay. So you don't have to worry about implementing it for fiscal year 20 and 21. Everything was pushed out a year. So that gives you a little bit of a break. But these items are pretty technical, and we'll work directly with Melanie to make sure that the school has all these properly implemented, so they won't become an issue in the audit in in the future fiscal years. But the largest change is we have to take a look at the fiduciary activities of the school and make sure that those are properly presented. There's a large change in how leases will be presented in the future. Fortunately, the district doesn't have that many leases, so you won't really see a large change in your financial statements. And the third major change is how interest is accounted for if you do undertake any future construction projects. So I just wanted to make you as the Audit Subcommittee aware that these new guidance are coming out in fiscal years 21 and 22. But we'll work with Melanie to incorporate those within your financial statements. But I don't see a major impact or major changes between the audit report that you were looking at for fiscal year 19 and the implementation of these. So you shouldn't expect a large major changes that you should be aware of or that you would need to explain to anybody who's reading the district's financial statements. So if you get a question from a banker or so forth, you shouldn't see any large changes.
Great.
And then the last part of the package is, I'm not going to go through this in detail, is a letter from us as your audit firm to you as the audit committee. Everything in this letter I already went over. And if there were findings, if there were issues with internal controls or compliance or fraud, we would be going through this letter in detail because that's where I would explain the findings and the impact. But there was no issue. So I'm not going to go through this letter in detail because we've already walked through everything and everything's pretty much status quo.
Okay, I do have a question.
Sure.
I'm just interested, and I probably asked it before. On the liabilities and the OPEB and pension obligation.
Yes.
So in 2008, it doubled. So is that because we had more retirees or?
No, there was a change in the accounting standards for how OPEBs were calculated. So fiscal year 2018 was the first time all governments, it's not just school districts or just Shawsheen, everybody changed how the OPEB was calculated. So the actuarial calculations changed, and as a result of that, every single organization who had an OPEB saw a very large increase in their liability, and that was implemented in 2018.
And so every year, the actuarial does an update. Every other year, he does an extreme, like I reach out to the GIC, they have to provide a document. We go through all of our reports. We provide sick leave buyback information, date of birth, who's on our health insurance, any contract changes. So every other year, it's a pretty involved process with the actuarial. But on the off years, they just look at kind of quickly what's changed. So this is something that's very involved.
Next year it might spike again.
Yes, and then we take his report, Parker's, and we send it to Colleen, and then she puts it in here. Yeah.
All right.
So they're separate from the auditors.
Thank you.
Right. So that's not something you probably don't see in the monthly or quarterly financial statements. It's really a year-end entry that is made and represented in the audit after the actuarial report is received.
All right. Thank you. I'm glad there were no findings.
Yeah. Ever.
Yep. But Melanie has about a 20-year record for no findings?
That's right. We're going to keep it going.
Do we get a discount for good behavior?
You don't get a large increase for findings. How about that? And as I mentioned, the audit report itself is still draft. So upon the approval, we can issue final. So when you did read it, if you have any questions, or if you saw any typos or anything like that, there is still time for me to make any changes that you want.
Yeah, I didn't see them. I read it through it all, and I didn't see any. So
excellent.
By the time I got to page 50, I was like getting a little tired.
So the goal is approval tonight, and then you and I will touch base tomorrow, Colleen, because Moody's is reaching out. They need to get it filed sooner than later. So if you and I can turn it around quickly, I know I owe you 2 numbers that I'll have to. I have them. I just forgot to send them. So if you and I can hopefully flip it in the next day or 2, I can send it out to everybody that I need to, and then we can get the single audit filed.
Yeah, that's no problem. We just need those 2 numbers, and then all I need is the signed representation letter, and we can go final.
Excellent. Thank you, Colleen.
Okay. Thank you very much, Colleen. I have to wrap this up. So
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Yeah, nice meeting you as well. Maybe next year we'll meet in person.
Absolutely.
All right.
Have a good night,
Congratulations,
everyone.
Melanie. Nice job.
Thank you.